This all seemed too familiar. The Primarch Guilliman gazed upon the burning ruins of Calth from the balcony of a building reaching the very ceiling of the subterranean caverns. Calth's hive city, once buzzing and brimming with life, now drenched in blood and fire. The screams, the pain, the suffering of the innocent as the destructive forces of chaos tore down the foundations of man. The blood in his mouth, the ache in his muscles. Guilliman, tired, beaten down. The perverse Phoenician tore at Guilliman's resolve through days of ceaseless combat. Day after day, wave after wave of flesh and metal slammed against Guilliman. The days allowed Fulgrim time to prepare his speeches, innumerable in words, almost as expansive as the marauders of the former Third Legion, with words almost as overly verbose and grandiose as Fulgrim's ego. Yet, at the eve of his triumph, Fulgrim had the perfect combination of words.
Oh, great Lord Commander, how long has it been? Time has been so dreadfully muddy since I last gazed upon your rather dull appearance. Yet somehow you managed to look even worse this time. Your face is full of wrinkles, your voice devoid of the youthful vigor of yore. Even your armor befits one of your dreadnought-esque toddlers rather than that of a son of the Emperor.
Fulgrim wriggled like a dry tongue, newly wet and dripping with blood. In his time since rebirth, his form only became more ethereal, a mockery of reality, glistening with light that would render the finest cybernetics useless from visual overload.
Even with Father's sword, you could bring low only so many of my toys, my playthings, sons, machines, objects, whatever you call them these days.
Fulgrim taunted, his grotesque, horned face less than a meter from Guilliman's. Guilliman twitched. The implication that Fulgrim dared to compare his sons to those abominations struck a nerve. Unlike you, abomination. Guilliman tightened his digits around the grip of his weapon. I am proud to have the title of father. He swiped at Fulgrim, attempting to cut down this wretched warp spawn, nicking Fulgrim's pauldron, only to be met with a brutal hook to the jaw from Fulgrim's fist. Fortune smiled upon Guilliman. He witnessed similar strikes render many of his sons into a fine mist, but the ringing in his ears made him think otherwise.
That blade, so devoid of class, is it not? I remember you in the early days, Lord of Ultramar.
Fulgrim spat mockingly.
You had such class, such style, such beauty and grace. Every step your sons lapped into their mentally minuscule gullets, gorging themselves on the sheer girth of royalty that was their father's mere presence.
Fulgrim paused, turning to the battlefield across the cliffside opposite to the two demigods. Guilliman slowly rose and raised the Emperor's sword.
Now you treat these ones as if they were us. Perhaps that sword truly does match you, Rabute.
Guilliman's strikes failed to meet their mark, one after the other. The Phoenician, even with his incredible mass, was far swifter than even the most imperceptible of Eldari. Not even the beam of the greatest lasgun in the galaxy could match the speed that Fulgrim possessed.
You disappoint me, dear brother.
Fulgrim slammed a fist into Guilliman's chest, the strike reverberating his metal shell. Guilliman replied with a missed stab.
From your drab appearance.
Another strike.
To your horrifically outdated honor.
A blow to Guilliman's shoulder, jostling the socket. Guilliman replied with a strike to Fulgrim's jaw. Fulgrim locked Guilliman into a death grip with both sets of his adhesive, tenebrous arms.
All the way to your wretched reliance on that blasted corpse on Terra!
Guilliman struck at Fulgrim's face again, interrupting his tirade. A furious Fulgrim slammed Guilliman through a nearby wall, pervasively pushing the Lord of Ultramar towards the ledge of the balcony, toying with his prey like a predator to a trapped bird. This would prove to be Fulgrim's undoing. For each push, Guilliman found a new crack in Fulgrim's offense.
Truly, Guilliman, you are the greatest of the Emperor's sons, for you have the only trait worth noting.
Fulgrim guffawed.
The trait of being alive!
Fulgrim's boisterous laughter echoed. Guilliman's brow twitched, his anger flared, and he took aim. With a thrust of his father's blade, he baited Fulgrim to evade to his right. Another stroke of the blade forces Fulgrim into a mocking dance. But all of it seemed for naught, as Guilliman's back faced the open balcony.
Oh, little Guilliman, you're slowing down. Is this age or exhaustion? Surely it must be age. The Guilliman I knew would never be this slow.
Guilliman was unmoved by the biting cold of Fulgrim's words. Little more than droplets in a storm.
Oh, but surely your goal isn't to bore me to death.
Guilliman's brow raised, his mind calculating several contingencies for the upcoming descent.
What do you hope to accomplish, brother? Did you forget?
Fulgrim's wings flexed. It was clear he knew what Guilliman was planning as he pressed the Lord of Ultramar closer toward the edge of the balcony. This strategy would have proven true. However, a single caveat shattered Fulgrim's ambitions. Guilliman's second strike to Fulgrim's visage was a mere distraction. In Fulgrim's rage, he failed to process the sensation of his left wing being eviscerated, bathed in golden fire. Guilliman had found his mark. Fulgrim scoffed.
Huh?
He attempted to maneuver himself away from the balcony, but Guilliman's swiftness proved greater. Guilliman plunged his father's blade into Fulgrim's mass and forced them both off the metallic frame of the balcony. No matter how much Fulgrim attempted to wriggle free, his position was disadvantaged. He could not escape, and all objects he attempted to ground himself with were far too light for his massive frame. They both fell, an airborne clash resulting in devastating damage to Guilliman. Yet, Fulgrim would suffer in greater measure.
Bastard! I thought you better than trickery, Lord Regent!
Fulgrim's advantage in this battle was evident. His swiftness and stamina would put a well-rested athlete to shame. Guilliman's advantage was far more subtle. He has more than enough experience to deal with Fulgrim. As the two approached the ground, Guilliman dodged a hook from Fulgrim. With a thrust matching the speed of lightning, he skewered Fulgrim through the back, puncturing ethereal flesh and bone, sinew and gristle. He twisted the blade and cut through Fulgrim's abdomen, calculating the perfect moment to shift his centripetal force. With a swift movement, the Emperor's sword sliced through two of Fulgrim's appendages. Afterward, he angled their descent, forcing Fulgrim to absorb the full impact of their fall, the impact resulting in a crater. The sheer vibration of the impact shook the ground, followed by the bestial, enraged cry of the Demon Prince. This shriek, equal parts material and ethereal, silenced the battles in nearby alleys and crevices.
Looks like you've got a second wind.
Fulgrim hissed. He twirled his body in a swift motion to remove Guilliman from his flank. The wound Guilliman inflicted on him was deep, but not mortal. Given the situation, Guilliman was fortunate and skilled enough to land such a blow. Had it been a cleaner strike, Fulgrim might very well have been slain.
Now the wind dies!
Fulgrim slammed his tremendous frame into the ground. Guilliman kept his balance, even as Fulgrim sank into the ground. His movements as fierce as they were precise, he was attempting to use the very soil to consume Guilliman.
What's your step?
Fulgrim sang like a tone-deaf child. Guilliman thought that Fulgrim had become even more unbearable than the last time they had met. This steeled his resolve to separate Fulgrim's jaw from his head. Guilliman's speed was superior at this moment, unimpeded by the stone tomb his corrupted brother was currently digging himself into. He narrowly avoided each of Fulgrim's strikes from beneath the ground, each attack from Fulgrim's blade being read more easily than a children's book. A muffled growl, an echoing snicker. Guilliman takes action, plunging his flaming sword into the ground, the flames of the Emperor burning the earth beneath him, and an agonized shriek ruptured from the ground, too womanly to be considered that of a Primarch's. Fulgrim broke free from the earth, set ablaze by the psychic flame that slowly ate away at his frame. He bellowed.
It is only fitting that a tool of fathers used to try and fail to bring me low.
Fulgrim's serpentine tongue hissed.
Now, Guilliman, shall we have an encore?
Fulgrim's remaining appendages were filled with blades of varying sizes and shapes, glistening in the dim light of the environment.
Drink deep of death's well!
Fulgrim shouted, cutting into Guilliman at every angle. True, none of them had been deep enough to kill Guilliman, but in his exhausted state, he found that more strikes found their mark than not. Nearby, flames roared in an orange and crimson dance. Guilliman's body quivered. Every breath he took, every beat of his heart, every pump of blood was a triumph against the calling void. Every cut was a stinging reminder of his first death. His failure. His unfulfilled duty. His mind aimed. Damn you. He cursed the dark gods, he cursed the traitors, and he cursed Fulgrim, knowing their victories are only won through trickery and deceit. Every inch of his body screamed for relief.
Had I only a moment to rest,
the Primarch thought.
Had I just a crumb of bread,
the Lord of Ultramar whispered.
I would bring you low, abomination.
Guilliman's very cells wept in sorrow. Fulgrim had no such issue. The warp's gifts invigorated him with every twitch. Guilliman grasped his blade. Surely, he thought, that even if he falls here again, his father will be able to reach him. Even if fate does not will it, he knew his brother, the Lion, would take up arms against Fulgrim. It was the Lion's duty to strike, while the Lord Regent stood guard. Regardless, this time felt different. The light emanating from the sword of the Emperor had dimmed since his clash with Mortarion.
This may very well be my end,
Guilliman muttered.
But I swear that I will take you with me. For even if this is where I fall, I vow to you, Fulgrim, I will haunt you to the very end of existence.
Guilliman grit his teeth. The scraping of his molars would drive a mortal to shut their ears out of fear from going deaf.
Very well, Guilliman. One last stand against me. I promise you, your requiem will never be forgotten.
Fulgrim rose and arched his frame, a blade in each hand.
There will be 2 relics to remember you by. Your song?
Fulgrim reached for a crevice in his armor and tore a crystal from it.
And your soul.
Guilliman recognized this as a soul crystal, Eldar in origin. He was well aware that Fulgrim would not allow him the dignity of a clean death. An eternity of suffering awaited him if he falls here. Guilliman stood tall. Even in his exhausted state, his face and armor caked in blood, he would stand proud and face death yet again as a true son of the Emperor. Guilliman's mind raced. He thought of several strategies to bring Fulgrim low. Each of them would save him from an eternity of torment, but most would end in his demise. It mattered not. Better to die free than to live in eternal undeath at the hands of his former brother. Guilliman, seeing the deranged look on Fulgrim's face, calculated the exact moment to interrupt his brother's advance. He counted.
Face your death, Rabute! Time to end this!
Fulgrim's blade was mere inches away from Guilliman's throat.
Not this time.
Guilliman punctured Fulgrim's frame. He dropped flat toward the ground as an infant to its mother, his father's sword piercing Fulgrim's decadent armor and hide. As the Daemon Primarch screeched, he was slammed to the ground like a hammer to molten steel. Fulgrim seemed to almost liquefy, then solidify. Fulgrim roared, then began to chuckle. He knew this look in Guilliman's eyes. He would bring Fulgrim with him to the black void of death. Fulgrim was all too happy to oblige this challenge. Even if he is unable to secure a new plaything, especially one so tantalizing as his brother, he would at least gain the pleasure of shattering the Imperium's last inkling of hope. But first, to disarm his brother. In his exhaustive haze, the Lord of Ultramar couldn't react fast enough. The blow Fulgrim landed upon his arm crushed it. Bone fractured, blood vessels burst, and his hand went limp. Fulgrim's tail flicked Guilliman away from the flaming sword. Guilliman somersaulted, recovering quickly and equipping his secondary armament, his Gladius Incandor, a blade he had not touched since first receiving the Emperor's sword, and shall serve as his last torch against the darkness before him. Rabute braced himself. His defense had been decided upon. Fulgrim will die, and even if Guilliman must fall again, the Phoenician would be removed from the galaxy for a time. Fulgrim paused, taking in the situation.
And now, the curtain call, he declared to himself.
Fulgrim's never-ending laughter reached a crescendo as he charged. His eyes pulsated with deranged lunacy. He lusted for Guilliman's soul. Suddenly, Fulgrim halted. Thinking it was just a mental slip-up from the adrenaline and chemical fluctuation pulsating through his ecstatic, overstimulated brain, he charged again. And stopped. That's when the pain began, and Fulgrim found himself thrown against a nearby wall. Fulgrim knew that he wasn't just imagining the sensation of pain. He pondered what foolish knight or titan had dared to strike him, before the sensation of pain was classified as a burning, stinging pain deep into his very soul. Guilliman saw a flash of light, not gold like that of his father's, but a flaming orange and red, a sign of the damned. Fulgrim pulled his tail away. This pain felt familiar, unlike any sort of pleasure he has felt from the slightest pricks to the deepest cuts. This was entirely unpleasant. A sickening nausea would overtake him, a sensation that had not been felt since
Primarch Fulgrim!
Fulgrim's ears rang with the pang of an absent father whose name had been called by a most hateful child. Fulgrim turned his head toward the source. Dread consumed every fiber that twisted to meet the voice. The flames behind him took shape, eerily humanoid yet thicker in frame. The flaming form stared down the Primarch. It was large, larger than even the largest dreadnought. Its design was ancient.
Who dares strike at me? I am he who remembers.
The flaming dreadnought's movement was swift. It stomped upon Fulgrim's tail, before a blackened whirling of flames and hateful ballistics blasted from the dreadnought's assault cannon.
The ancient of rights!
Fulgrim remembered the one who rejected him, his only definitive, true defeat. There was no glory, no honor, no philosophical conquest in this failure that stood before him. He remembered the only one who not only wounded, but scarred him to his very soul.
No, he can't, no, not you!
The dreadnought crushed Fulgrim's tail underfoot. Fulgrim pulled away, narrowly escaping the flaming rounds of the dreadnought, and crashed into a nearby wall to avoid the fury of the hulking mass. He used this moment to recover, bearing his remaining armaments towards the flaming figure and raising his entire trunk to tower over the dreadnought. As the dreadnought's chest blazed in a fiery light, the clear mark of the Third Legion radiating in hateful splendor, Fulgrim's very essence shrieked at his words. Fulgrim's form sparked a light, emanating with purple, blazing fury. A banshee's cry in equal measures of agony, shame, and hate. Damn you! The dreadnought's words cut deeper than any blade as the color drained from Fulgrim.
Even in death, I still serve.
The Ancient awakes.
Rising from the void, burning hotter than the stars. Vengeance carved deep in my scars. I see the nerve of Phoenician burns. For believing in them, I still serve.